Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Juju Show number 50, the big 5-0. We have made it. Today, it's a light crew. It's just me. We have the summer holidays are in full swing, and we'll try to get this one nice and short because I'll be honest, even I want to get out and work out from the back deck today where it's nice out. Good old summer weather is approaching. But first, let's talk about some Juju news. What's going on? The latest going down. So first off, let's start off as always with releases. This week saw the release of Juju 2.6.3. So our third point release on the Juju 2.6 series. It's purely a bug fix release. However, it was one where we took a few minutes to fix an array of various issues. So if you had problems with manual providers, or there were a couple issues with some GCE things with a firewall issue that had come up, those are all corrected and available in 2.6.3. And if you've got stable Juju Snap ready to go, you're good. You've got it. So go give it a try. Let the team know how it's working for you. And if you find anything else, make sure to let us know. File a bug, and we'll look forward to getting that squared away for you. Next up, we have a few different conversations from Discourse I wanted to highlight. One was there was a question from somebody. Let's see if I know who asked it. I don't have that one ready. Let's see. That one, well, actually, it's from Daldries in Discourse, who asks, I'm new to Juju, and you have to use security tools such as Nmap and Mashscan, but couldn't find anything using the Juju GUI. So does Juju support these kind of tools? And I wanted to highlight this because I think this is an area that we could really use some community help and growth in. So Juju is great for modeling, what's running in the stack, and for making sure we have the Juju idea of subordinates. I think is really great for things like we use it a lot for logging and for monitoring with Telegraph and Nagios and those kind of things. But I think there's a good place for security tools in this manner where you could easily see dropping something into a model that can help do things like periodic port scans or whatnot of all the entities in the model, and making sure that nothing's open that shouldn't be expected, or that might run a deployment of your software stack, and then something you would put in that model to then attempt to do some sort of attacking or keyhole, kind of shaking around and stuff. And I think that would be a really exciting tool to be able to design charms that can do that in such a way that they could discover and poke across the model and give you confidence. And that can definitely be then, automated and part of a CI/CD system to help make sure that the operations code that you're using to run your things in production is up to the security standards that you have. So let me know what you think. I'd be curious what tools would be really interesting. And if you are someone who uses these tools a lot, do you think, managing that with Juju, with actions triggered from operators and stuff, could be really helpful ways of encouraging, pushing those security tools down to, the developers who are working on this stuff, up and down the actual stack from getting from development out to production. Next up, there is I wanted to remind, this was purely hey, don't forget this is here thing. There was a bug filed to get .tox directories ignored by Juju when you do a deploy from a local charm or whatnot. And Juju has a mechanism for ignoring things. We did go ahead and add the .text support as a default. We will ignore them now in Juju. But there's a .juju ignore file that you can stick in charms. And when you use that, Juju will make sure that the files in the ignore don't get sent up to the controller and then out to each machine as part of that. So if you've got something kind of big, something that will slow down, zipping your charm, sending it across the controller, getting the units going or whatnot, or you just don't want it leaked. Maybe it has a credential file for something locally that you don't want to get passed around, So I just want to remind folks that we do have a .juju ignore. There's links and information around that in Discourse and in our documentation. I encourage you to look out for it, but don't forget it's there. It's the kind of thing that you don't think about until you need it. And then when you need it, it's ready. Let's see. Next up, one of our newer developers in the team asked a question about, should the controller host an apt cache? And this was an interesting question. And what I wanted to do is, so I thought it was an interesting question, an interesting discussion, and I think that there's other things like this, and I wanted to see if we can keep the discussion going and again encourage folks in the community to get involved in this. The proposal here is that obviously an app cache is a good thing, right? You cache frequently used files. If you have 10 units of something, you know you're going to probably apt install something 10 times in the same model, in the same subnet, very, very close to each other. And so the question, there was obviously some pros. Hey, who wouldn't want to run an app cache? But then there were actually some thoughts about, well, you have to remember something, is that whenever you introduce a cache or a tool out of the box, you need to make sure that that can be managed. App caches need to be managed as far as how often they update, where are they getting their upstream updates from, what kind of disk utilization do you give the cache, and what happens when that disk has issues, that folks need to know that that cache is a safe place to wipe data out of. So it's not always as cut and dry as going, hey, we can install this thing and let it go, and hey, yay, everything got faster. Because I feel like there's kind of more to the story. But there are other things like this that are interesting, for apps. Then obviously you might think of things like snaps. There's a snap proxy tool that you can use to help you get your snaps and can help with things like caching, I believe. We do things with LexD where we run a LexD cache for doing development and things locally to help with performance there. Anytime that you have expensive IO, introducing a cache is something that's useful to do. We came down to on this side that it's something that would be great to enable folks to easily add. And so for us, this would look like potentially an app cache charm that you could install on the controller model and then have Juju leverage that. So Juju has config to say where an app cache may be in your network, because often companies will run one for the corporate network. And so you can tell Juju, hey, by the way, there's an app cache over here, go use it. I think in a model that you want to have it, or a controller where you have lots of models where you want to have a common cache, it would make a lot of sense to stick that in the controller, maybe even on one of the controller machines if you've got the spare hardware and capacity to manage it. But it's definitely not something we want to kind of have invisibly set up running, and it's that kind of magic that's great when it works, and it's very ungreat when it doesn't work. So what else is like that you can think of? What other kind of things would be good to have? And do you run an app cache on your network? Do you run something in your controllers? And if you do, let us know. We'd be curious. Let's see. And then Daldry's again had another question about being new to Juju and a question about 2 applications or files into one charm. Trying to reduce the number of charms that they're managing, maintaining. And I wanted to talk about this because this is something that I know it's one of those practical versus theoretical. In practice, right, in an ideal modeling world, every layer would have its own charm. And if they were on the same machine, you would just deploy them with placement or with a subordinate charm, or maybe on a container on a thing in order to help reduce your actual resource utilization, but you would model them independently. And there are a few reasons for that. One is if you have 2 applications, then it means that they can't be used independently, right? So if you're already using like an HA proxy or something for SSL termination up front, then having Nginx baked into a charm for a web application, and that charm supporting SSL termination just means now you've got 2 places to get it wrong. Or you're proxying things through an Nginx that's already going through another proxy externally. So it does add more layers, and you can't get around that. However, there are some things that just call them peanut butter and jelly, that go together, and very much if you have a web app of some sort, having a baked in web server installed on a charm for that out of the box, it might just make sense, right? Like, you're going to need configuration options anyway. You're going to have code in your charms for how it scales or whatnot. And having something to serve the app, isn't really all that crazy or all that unusual. It could be as simple as, small apps that have a database locally, maybe they're using an SQLite or something embedded, who knows? So it's not a hard and fast rule. definitely want to encourage folks to, the important thing is to get your things charmed up and going. You can always break them apart later as the complexity rises and as things mature. But, but don't get too hung up on it. If you've got two things that go together in one charm and that makes sense in your world or whatnot, totally encourage you to go through and try it. Don't let any of that stuff stop you. No need for theory to trump getting crap done, for sure. Let's see. So checking our list of things to hit on, I think that's the list, which gets us to demo time. But I'm going to cheat because I've got bleeding edge demo stuff that didn't even land today yet, but it is landing as we speak. So basically our CI infrastructure is going through and landing it. And I was so excited. I want to get everyone a heads up for a couple of reasons. So first, let's review what is Juju Trust. And trust in Juju, and I'm going to see if I can get my screen share thing going here, is a bit of that. So sometimes there are charms that would like to leverage the cloud API that it's deployed upon. One of the examples I really like about this are charms that might say, you know what, if you configure me to back things up to S3, I will happily do so. But in order to do that, the charm is going to need to be able to talk to your S3 account. And to do that, you could go about it two ways. One, you could set the charm up to accept configuration for that, which is a little bit messy. That means you're putting credentials into configuration that's much more visible and available to people to see. If you have a read-only user of a Juju model, they can see those credentials and config and whatnot. But the other side of that is we have an idea of trusting the charm. And what if we do is if we deploy a charm, and here you can see in the documentation with a -- trust flag, this lets the charm in the hooks ask for the cloud credentials the model is using so that it can get those credentials and then perform actions against the cloud. So here we can trust an AWS integrator charm. And there's an integrator charm for most of the clouds we support. The idea being that it lets operators do things against the native cloud APIs that maybe you don't have something internally using. One of the big examples of this would be like load balancing. If you deploy CDK, you can set up with an integrator charm to have load balancing done by the native cloud tool. And it gets those credentials to make the calls to the underlying cloud API from Juju itself. So if you were, in theory, to update those credentials, then the units could actually get the updated credentials, and it helps you manage things. If you deploy a charm and it doesn't need those credentials right away, again, if you later on turn on, hey, back up your stuff to S3, the hooks there can go into a block state going, hey, I'm not trusted. I need to be trusted to get cloud credentials so that I can actually talk to S3 and store your data. So you can trust it after the fact just using the Juju trust command. This is great and all. It works well for charms, but in Juju, we like to think a lot of solutions in terms of bundles. And here's a list of the integrator charms. I was just kind of doing a quick look through. You can see there's OpenStack, Azure, GCP, vSphere, most of the places where we would install like a CDK on. And here's we have a tutorial around using this for the K8s AWS integration. So again, you can set up a K8s model, and here's a charm that needs the integration. And here you can see that we actually trust it. But the thing is that we often think in terms of bundles. This is what a deployment of that Kubernetes actually looks like. So what we need to be able to say, hey, in this bundle, there are certain applications that need to have trust granted to them. That comes from someone who creates the bundle, right? So kind of a developer or the solution provider. But what we want to make sure is that the operator, the person who is actually doing the deployment, it's their credentials that are being given to the application. We want to make sure that they're aware of it and that they grant it, and that you don't just copy and paste some bundle deployment command from the internet and have it just go out and have access to your credentials and you don't realize it. So what we've done is just that. We've enabled you to, in a bundle, specify that this AWS integrator charm would like to be trusted. But that's not enough, because what you actually have to have is you have to have the trust flag on the bundle deployment command so that you can say, yes, go ahead and deploy it, and I trust it. So let me switch to my terminal real quick and I'll show you. So what does this look like, Rick? So here I've got my terminal and I've got this bundle file. Now I'm on, let's Juju status here. I've got an empty model on Google, and I've got the Google integrator charm going here. And what I can do is attempt to deploy it. So Juju deploy my bundle. And what's new is that it gives you a nice error. It goes, hey, I'm not going to deploy this right now because something in that bundle wants to be trusted with your cloud credentials. But if you want to, I will do it. So this is the bit that hasn't landed yet. If I deploy it with trust, boom, it's not there yet. That is actually going through CI/CD as we speak, and that will be in the edge snap of Juju within hours. And so I wanted to get everyone going on this because the trick of having this work well is people that have bundles need to go in and update them to add this trust line to the charms that need it. And so that obviously takes time to go in and add that. So what I encourage is people that are providing bundles that have charms that need to be trusted to go ahead, a call to action, go update them. By the time you hear this or see this or whatnot, you should be able to do it with the edge snap in Juju. And so if you do, if we look at our, oh, whoops, helps if I can run the right command here. You can see we have unstable and then in the edge track right now. And it's actually, I'm actually going to go even smarter here. It's in the 2.6 edge track because we're landing this as a 2.6 point release feature. It's not a huge feature, and we want folks to get it because it solves a small problem for them right now. So to do this, I would do snap refresh. And instead of latest edge, I would do 2.6 edge. And then it wants my password because I'm going to install some stuff. And let's see. Go, little snap world, go. This is where we see how fast my internet connection is here from, or at least how fast the Wi-Fi dongle on my machine here is. Almost there, and kablooey. So let's just make sure that it hasn't hit through CI yet. Let's try one more time. It did. Look at that. It went live as we spoke. So there you go. Now you can see we uploaded and added the charm. And if I run status, it's going to run and come up, and it will be a trusted application that will have access to my Google Cloud credentials in order to integrate with that underlying cloud. So there you go. Go grab the latest Edge Snap, try it out, and let me know what you think. Hopefully, folks find this to be a useful addition to the bundle definition, and it reduces some of the extra complexity in getting something up and running that requires this credential trust support. That's all I've got for this week. See you all in 2 weeks, where I've completely hooked up the Open Mano folks to come chat to us about what they're doing with Kubernetes charms, providing Open Mano solutions. So I'm excited because I have a lot to learn here, and we'll get some folks from that team on to talk to us about it. So till next time, everyone have fun.